The U.S. Coast Guard is in active pursuit of a third oil tanker near Venezuela. Officials accuse it of evading Washington sanctions. It's the second such operation this weekend. Caracas condemns Saturday's seizure as a violation of international law, saying it will file a complaint with the UN Security Council. The U.S. has imposed a blockade of sanctioned tankers entering and leaving Venezuela and has increased its military presence in the region to combat alleged drug trafficking. John Feeley is a former U.S. ambassador to Panama. He joins me now for more from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure, Aaron.
So this is the second such operation this weekend and the third in recent weeks. So how exactly high are tensions running at the moment in the Caribbean?
Oh, tensions have been high for quite a while. I mean, let's be very frank. This is the largest flotilla that the United States has assembled there in anybody's living memory. The issue has been, what is the purpose of all this military hardware, American military hardware, in the waters of the Southern Caribbean? Is it a counter-narcotics mission? Is it a regime change mission? Is it simply, as we're seeing in this latest development, the implementation of a legitimate sanctions regime? The fact is, Aaron, the hardware gets bigger, the presence grows more menacing, and unfortunately, the motive behind it all grows more confusing.
Well, that actually begs the question, with there being a confused motive, as you said, are there legal grounds for the U.S. to seize ships in the region?
Oh, very much so. I mean, this actually is something that a number of people, even in the Biden administration, had recommended. Look, we've got 3 cases so far. Of them, the skipper was boarded last week. This was a ship that was on a U.S. sanctions list for having worked in terms of trafficking oil to the Iranian ICRG. It was boarded. There was a judicial warrant for it out of a U.S. court, a seizure warrant, and it was boarded and it was brought to a port in Galveston in Texas. The second one, boarded yesterday, the Centuries, was not on a sanctions list by the United States. It had picked up oil, and it's not entirely clear what the status of that ship is, but it was not on a sanctions list. This third ship, the Bella 1, was on a U.S. sanctions list as well for working in Iran, and it has decided to evade seizure. And so there is what the U.S. Coast Guard calls an active pursuit underway right now. But there is a legal basis for these detentions of the tankers, although we have to find out in that second one.
So what message exactly do you think the United States is attempting to send to Latin America and the world more broadly with these operations?
Well, look, let's be honest. Implementing a sanctions regime is one thing. Stopping drug trafficking is another. Tipping over a regime through military force is quite another. I'm not entirely sure. I think, Aaron, unfortunately, that what we're seeing here is the result of improvisational amateurism. From the beginning of this second Trump administration, it's clear that they don't like Nicolas Maduro. Well, they can get in line. A lot of people don't like Nicolas Maduro or the human rights abusing regime of Venezuela these days. But what they started out with was clearly a negotiation strategy. By the summer, that was clear it had failed. The president told Rick Grenell, his special envoy, to come home and stop negotiating. And then the buildup began. The buildup to date, starting with the first attack on a small vessel on September 2nd, has been declared a counter-narcotics mission. But over the last 3 months, inevitably, we're all asking these questions. Is it about oil? Is it about regime change? And sadly, we don't have any greater clarity from the Trump administration.
Now, as a former Marine pilot yourself, how do you assess the risks of escalation when U.S. forces operate so close to Venezuelan territorial waters?
Well, as long as they stay outside the waters, or quite frankly, even in the waters, because Venezuela's Navy really isn't much to speak of, there really isn't much risk to U.S. forces. If they decide to use standoff missile attacks from the multiple ships they have in the region that are capable of firing the Tomahawk missile with the Aegis guidance system, which is deadly accurate, they can pinpoint attacks on any number of places inside Venezuela, which is part of the speculation I believe they are trying to create to provoke regime collapse. Where there is real risk to American military personnel is if they decide to invade. And frankly, Aaron, most observers here in the United States think that's still a remote possibility because it's wildly unpopular here in the United States. Only about 20% of the American people would support boots on the ground. And it is an electoral year in 2026 with midterms.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That was John Feeley, former U.S. ambassador to Panama and a former Marine pilot. Thank you very much for your expertise.
A pleasure, Aaron.